By the time we awakened this morning, the firefighter strike was already in full swing. And just when did the whole thing get started? Our Mark Wolin tells the story as he saw it during his pre-dawn vigil.
It's 4:30 in the morning, and the firefighters are battling the last fire before beginning their strike. The fire is small, and in minutes they have it under control and get ready for the walkout. At 5:15 sharp, it happens. As many as 4,000 firefighters go on strike for the first time in the history of Chicago. After months of threats, the action comes fast, with only a few hours of warning. On the south side, on Wells Street, west on Racine, north on Dearborn, and all over town, the potentially disastrous strike has begun.
What if there's a fire, the fire call goes unanswered, and a lot of people die because you guys are on strike?
It's on the mayor's back.
The mayor called the strike?
Right, yeah, you can say that, yeah.
6:19 a.m. Word moves through the crowd. A circuit judge has ordered the men back to work, and yet the mood still remains defiant.
Yeah, you just do what they want. It's time for us to get something.
We promised to work, and we work every day. She promised us a contract.
Well, hasn't the city offered to sign a contract with the firefighters union?
Not to my knowledge, they haven't.
And there's sympathy for the strikers, even from police who've been assigned to protect anyone wanting to cross the picket lines.
Any police officer has reasonable grounds to believe that a person is committing or has committed an offense, the police officer will sign the complaint. Don't you believe it?
In only an hour or so, it's become apparent the strike has virtually paralyzed fire protection in the city. The union is claiming 90% of the firefighters are out, and at this station, only 5 men are on duty, and 2 of them are cadets. And so begins the latest in a series of crises racking the town they used to call the city that works.
Good evening. It seems like I've said this before, but Chicago is facing another crisis tonight. The firemen are still on strike, leaving a city of more than 3 million people without full fire protection. And the way union leader Frank Mascari is talking, it's going to stay that way. He says the men will not go back despite any court order until the city gives in. And Mayor Jane Byrne says no giving to any illegal striking firemen. That leaves a void to be filled by recruits, supervisory personnel, some cadets, and some suburban fire departments. We've been lucky, however. No major fires have broken out within the city since the firemen went out at 5:15 this morning. They walked out of their firehouses and onto the picket lines after the union told Mayor Byrne there would be a strike. The mayor didn't waste any time blasting them, saying anyone who didn't report for work would be fired. She also insisted there was enough manpower to protect the city. But the mayor's threat did little to get the men back on the job. The union says more than 95% of the force's 4,350 men stayed away today. The mayor says it's less. But even a pre-dawn court-issued restraining order didn't budge the men or their union chief. At this hour, neither side is talking to the other. There are 2 key issues in the strike: whether officers should be excluded from a contract and the number of men that should be placed on the equipment. Firemen met tonight with union leaders for a status report. Mary Laney was there too, and she has a report on how it went.
Well, Bill, tonight the firemen are united in their stand for collective bargaining rights. They say Mayor Byrne campaigned on the promise they would have it. Now they say they'll strike until they get it. And judging by what Union President Frank Mascari told Walter on our 5 o'clock news, there could be some fireworks before it's all over.
How close we are to storming the firehouse to take over the apparatus without permission?
That close. How close we are to what? To what?
To storming them firehouses and take them over by force.
You.
Our men. Our men.
At about 7:45 tonight, firemen began coming here to the Musicians Hall at 175 West Washington for a status report. And it was clear that most were hoping the strike could soon be settled and they could return to work. Would you like to see the mayor say, let's negotiate and end this strike and get back to fighting fires?
Oh, definitely. That's what we all want. We all want to go back to work. None of us want to be out here. We don't want the people of Chicago to be angry with us. Because we grew up here, we love Chicago, and we don't want nobody hurt, especially any children, anybody.
No sooner did the meeting get underway when a police officer and a messenger arrived with orders directly from Fire Commissioner Richard Albrecht.
All officers and members failing to report and order herein will be subject to disciplinary action, including discharge. Happy Valentine's Day, Richard Albrecht.
Hey, we sent her We ain't never going to be sweethearts.
Following tonight's meeting, firemen said only that they are united now in their determination to stay out on strike, despite an order from the court ordering them back to work. The main issue is a collective bargaining unit that the union wants to include fire captains, lieutenants, engineers, and firefighters. And there is indication tonight that if City Hall would give them that, the firefighters would agree to a no-strike clause in their contract. But at this point, it's a standoff. Mayor Byrne refuses to negotiate until the firemen are back at work. And the union and firemen refuse to return until the mayor resumes negotiations. Bill and Walter?
Marianne, on the legal front, the city returns to court tomorrow seeking a preliminary injunction against the firemen, and the city says it may seek contempt charges against the union for violating today's back-to-work order. An angry Mayor Byrne told reporters that firefighters who do not report to work tomorrow morning will never again work for the Chicago Fire Department.
I think it is a very, very sad day for Chicago and for a very, very famous fire department. I think it's a sad, sick day.
But first, our top story tonight, the Chicago Fire Officers Association is saying that the strike called by the firemen's union is ill-conceived. That association, which claims to represent about 600 captains, lieutenants, and fire marshals, says it wants a contract, but insists a no-strike clause be included in any agreement between the union and the city. Now, it's been reported the firemen's union, headed by Frank Mascari, has been opposed to any no-strike provisions. He has denied it to me, but it's nevertheless an issue in this negotiations. As a result, the Officers Association is demanding that it be included in negotiations with the city and the union. Now, officials from the association are at City Hall right now, meeting with Mayor Byrne and Fire Commissioner Richard Albrecht. And new efforts are being made to arrange a negotiated settlement in the strike. And those efforts began with an encounter between Mayor Byrne and strikers manning a picket line outside City Hall. Emery King reports.
Union members stayed on the picket lines all night, and when day 2 of the city's first firefighter strike dawned, there was still no movement toward a settlement. Mayor Jane Byrne had cemented the standoff when she announced Thursday no talks would take place until the firemen returned to work. Ironically, the mayor may have begun the talks herself. When she met with picketers outside City Hall on LaSalle Street, there was a heated discussion of the issues.
You've got to believe that every man, every rank-and-file man, does not want to strike, does not want a strike provision in a contract. We want a fair and equitable contract, and we want a no-strike clause in it.
Do you trust him?
Right now, I don't. I used to. I respected the man very much because I don't believe what he says.
I am telling you, you're being misled.
If you sign that we will have impartial arbitrators, I'll go back to work immediately. If you sign it and put it in a statement and press, I will go back to work immediately because I'll trust you that far.
Leave now.
I'll leave now and I'll go back to the firehouse.
Right now.
As long as it's impartial arbitrators and we had nothing to do with the city ordinance.
Come on in with her.
And up to the mayor's office they went. 15 or 20 minutes later, the men came out with new information to report to their union leaders. But those leaders were unimpressed. They charged Mayor Byrne with employing strike-breaking tactics.
They didn't bring back a message from the mayor.
Well, are we talking about possibly...
She just tried to create a doubt in their mind that this leadership was something less than honest with the membership, all right? And they're back on the street.
Yet the mayor's confrontation prompted mediators to invite both sides back to the table. They began their talks at 12:30 this afternoon in the Bismarck Hotel. And those talks lasted for 4 hours here in the Bismarck Hotel, with both sides caucusing separately and meeting together. When they went out at 4:30 this afternoon, they took a 2-hour recess. They're planning to come back in at 6:30, and they said absolutely nothing when they went out, so we have absolutely no word on how those talks are progressing. But one can only assume that after 4 hours of talks, they must have made some type of movement, at least a little bit. They are not back yet, so we are unable to get any reaction as to the Officers Association's latest developments. Bill and Harry?
As we indicated earlier, the negotiations in the firefighter strike shifted today from the Bismarck Hotel to Judge John Heckinger's chambers. Our Gene Randall has been covering that story today, and here's a live report from him. Gene?
Mike, negotiating teams for the Firefighters Union and the city have been using adjacent courtrooms here at the Daly Center as a setting for a kind of shuttle diplomacy, with Chancery Court Judge John Heckinger intent on traveling between the two sides to mediate. The shuttle spent most of the afternoon on the union side. So far, no word of progress, and the union delegation left here a half hour ago for dinner. Today's courtroom scene followed the early morning collapse of talks between the firefighters and the city. Both sides walked out of the Bismarck at 1 o'clock, and all they agreed on was that they had reached an impasse. And so the picketing went on through the night and through the third day of the walkout. But once again, Chicago was relatively fire-free, as another night and morning went by without a major test of a sharply reduced firefighting capability. There was a new element added today, the Firefighters Officers Association. Why does your association have a vested interest in this?
Because our people are officers, and they're presently working. The Fire Officers Association definitely has an interest in this. That's all I'd like to say at this time.
Are your interests any different than the rank-and-file firemen's interests?
We think our interests are distinct.
All sides now will deal with Judge John Heckinger. Do you welcome the judge taking an active part in this, Mr. Berry? Do you think it'll serve a useful function?
Yeah, I think so. It has in the past. I mean, in my experience, judges have been able to help resolve disputes.
Judge Heckinger says maybe it's time to start from scratch. Maybe it's time for a new face. But as the firefighters' union officials left here, they learned what Mayor Byrne had said at City Hall this afternoon. Their reaction was predictably angry. Frank Mascari's reaction was simply unrepeatable. He and his group say they'll be back here at 6 o'clock. Mike and Linda.
Good evening, everybody. Mayor Byrne is serving notice tonight that striking firemen will face disciplinary action with hearings to begin in 10 days. She says anybody who stays off the job will never work again for the fire department. And she's ordered officials to get out the hiring lists. Steve Shepard is here now. Steve has more on the story. Steve?
Mike, Mayor Byrne was as angry this afternoon as most anyone at City Hall could remember. She said the crisis provoked by the firemen's strike had intensified, but added that Chicago would not submit to what she termed the extortionate and unacceptable demands of the firefighters' union. She said that the city had agreed last night to submit all unsettled issues to impartial and binding arbitration, but added that the union rejected that offer. In response, she reaffirmed in the strongest language that firemen who remain on strike will be fired.
They will never again work in this administration. No fix, no clout, nothing. We'll put them back in here once the hearing is over. Nothing.
It is not unusual for a mayor in a situation like this to say she will fire striking employees. But Mayor Byrne seems so deeply angered and repeated that message so often that it appears she is entirely serious. In the meantime, Byrne has ordered several actions to attempt to deal with the strike. She has ordered the city's Corporation Council to seek contempt citations against the firemen in circuit court. She has directed city personnel officers to start recruiting 2,500 men from the fire department's official hiring list and the open market, and ordered that they be placed in working fire companies as soon as possible. And she has ordered a program to recruit retired and volunteer firemen for service. Mayor Byrne's actions today were not only prompted by the union's rejection of binding arbitration, but by acts of sabotage and threats of violence she says some striking firemen have engaged in.
There are fewer firemen out there by the hour because of this mob action, and I am not going to tolerate it. What would you call smashing 32 squad cars in different places? What would you call stuffing rags in vents? What would you call cutting cables? What would you call threatening brother policemen and firemen that you're going to take an axe to them? What would you call that?
The Chicago firemen's strike is not only continuing, it appears the battle lines are now getting harder.
We had a strike committee meeting, which you guys didn't know about, did you?
Tell us all about it.
Yeah. Well, they went there, and specifically they said we informed them that everybody's going to come down on you to get, bum publicity and everything else if something happens out there, and they'll definitely start to blame the firefighters for everything, even though we offered them to go back and man all the apparatuses and negotiate this. But they says we don't care what it is. My kids don't like me. My cousins don't like me. Nobody likes me. We ain't going back without a written contract. That was our commitment to them, and that's the way it's going to be.
Mascari is blaming the city for the lack of progress in negotiations. He says nothing substantial has been negotiated yet, and he says the city rejected a strike plan under which firefighters would continue to provide essential services while the negotiations continued.
Good evening, everybody. Less than half an hour ago, Mayor Jane Byrne extended her deadline for disciplinary action against firemen until 10 o'clock tomorrow morning. That deadline was to have taken effect right now, 10 o'clock tonight. Despite the extension, city and fire officials are continuing to urge the firefighters to return to work. There is a big question of just how many firemen would have gone back to work tonight if the 10 p.m. deadline had not been shifted. Steve Shepard is standing by at Engine Company 104, and Steve has a report on conditions there. Steve?
Mike, normally there are 22 officers and men assigned here to Engine Company 104 and Communications Company 424 at a station house at 14th Street and South Michigan Avenue, just south of the Loop in downtown Chicago. Tonight, all 22 of those officers and men are, in fact, out on strike. The last two men here to continue work left work this morning about 10 o'clock and joined their fellow picketers and firemen, so they are out on strike as well, and this house is 100% shut down, as many other houses are throughout the city. Many of the men here we talked to, in fact, all of them tonight, say that they will not go back to work at 10 o'clock tonight or at 10 o'clock tomorrow morning, no matter what Mayor Byrne or others say, until, of course, they get an authorization or a demand to do so from their union. That should come as no surprise to most of us. We talked to firemen earlier this evening in the 5th District, and they said that as the strike wears on, more men are leaving their stations and going on strike than coming back.
There's 580 people assigned out here, and there's 19 working, plus they've had a few candidates right out of school with no experience whatsoever.
You find
off the street people.
It seems that the number of firemen staying out of the stations is increasing, that instead of coming back, firemen who were staying at work are starting to leave now too, right?
It's probably the more Jane Byrne talks and the more she tells half-truths and lies, the more people are becoming more irate and walking out of the firehouses. They've gotten to the point where they just can't believe anything she says.
That comment was typical of those we heard from firemen throughout the city tonight. Mayor Byrne got angry today, and they got angry back. They seem especially upset about the Manning issue. They are angry at the mayor for practically blaming them for several deaths in the city of Chicago since the fire strike began. They say there have been many deaths from fires in Chicago over the past few years because they have been under strength, not enough men manning the units. So the battle lines, as we said earlier this evening, continue to draw tighter and tighter, and there is really no resolution in sight at this time. Mike or Susan?
Thank you, Steve. And city officials aren't the only ones pleading with the firefighters to return to work. A state judge has issued an ultimatum to the strikers: get back on the job by 10 a.m. tomorrow morning, or possibly face contempt of court charges.
What you're doing is wrong. You must first correct that wrong, and then I'll be able to, in fact, champion your position. If you don't do that, then you have to understand, my sworn oath, like your husbands and sons and fathers' sworn oath, is to uphold the law. And I definitely want you to understand that tomorrow morning at 10 o'clock, I will carry out my sworn oath and do my duty. It'll be distasteful because I've enjoyed my companionship and my relationship with all the firemen I know, and there are a lot of them, from the top-ranking officials down to the bottom. And you gentlemen know it. You'll lose me tomorrow if you don't cease tonight and go back on the job. Please do it. Families, encourage them to do it.
We don't have a contract. That's a commitment we made. We'll face it tomorrow morning at 10 o'clock, the whole group. That's all, okay?
Meantime, most of the city's firefighters were on the picket lines for the third day in a row, many huddling around garbage cans with small fires burning to keep them warm. 5 strikers, however, from a station at 80th and Kedzie were arrested after they allegedly blocked an engine arriving at the firehouse. They were all released after posting bond. Fire officials report there were also several incidents of firefighters being harassed and of windows being broken at some firehouses.
Well, Mike and Linda, Frank Mascari, the president of Local 2 of the Firefighters Union, has just walked into Chancery Court a moment ago. Judge John Heckinger tried again today to work out at least a temporary agreement to end the firefighters' strike. The way the judge put it, we didn't succeed. And the union now is faced with showing why it should not be charged with contempt of court. Union Chief Mascari began his day in court, outside the court. The event was a rally in Daly Plaza, where despite the frigid temperatures, hundreds of striking firefighters renewed their pledge to stay off the job until they get a written contract. Union Chief Mascari once again orchestrated the chorus.
They're going to come down with a lot of stuff, tell you everybody's going back. I've been up all night with phone calls. Their guys are going back to them firehouses. It's not true. They march them in the front and out the back. Okay? Keep the faith, man.
A short time later, Mascari walked into Chancery Court to face a judge who last night pleaded with the union to end its strike. A contempt citation Mascari knew could put him in jail. But from the time the city delegation arrived, the next 3.5 hours went into a last-ditch judicial try for some kind of agreement. But while reporters milled around outside, the effort inside was failing. Shortly after 2 o'clock, Judge John Heckinger ruled against a union motion to dismiss the city's contempt request. And Mascari and the rest were told to come back at 5 for a contempt hearing.
All right, yesterday, I guess the judge told us we'd go back to work. We would discuss and have a contract. The mayor says now go back to work and maybe we'll discuss a contract.
As he left, some of Mascari's people did what they have done before. They played the role of the bully, pinning a news camera crew against a wall, then reacting loudly when challenged.
The issue of how many firefighters are going back to work has been discussed. There are no exact estimates of how many of the city's striking firemen do remain off the job, but the strike still seems to be very effective. Our Rich Samuels has been visiting a number of firehouses today. Rich is now standing by with a live report on that. Rich.
Linda, we are at the headquarters of the 15th Battalion at Fillmore in California, waiting here in the bitter cold for Judge Heckinger's ruling. We're not waiting here alone. There are here perhaps 35 pickets, men who are obviously not working. Now, about 24 hours ago, Mayor Jane Byrne gave these men a choice. She said, go back to work by 10 a.m. this morning or face disciplinary hearings and possibly dismissal. Clearly, the men have not honored that request, and this scene should be a pretty good indication, give you a pretty good idea of just how striking firemen have responded to that ultimatum. Some men did return to work prior to the 10 a.m. deadline set by the mayor. More than 100, according to an early statement by the city, but officials later declined to say how many were back on the job, and it seemed clear not many were. A lone squad roll guarded Engine Company 103 near Laughlin and Warren. The station house was empty. Even the pickets had left. Strikers claimed 15th Battalion headquarters at California and Fillmore was the only large station staffed on the entire west side. And here the manpower was largely provided by cadets in training. The mayor's ultimatum here had fallen on deaf ears. Earlier, 75 firefighters fought a pre-dawn blaze at the Cryle Hotel at Garfield in Michigan. Pickets at a nearby station house claimed some of their number led several of the roughly 80 residents to safety. Fire officials said they could not confirm whether any strikers were on hand to help. The upper 2 stories of the building were destroyed by the fire. There were no injuries, but many were left homeless. They're being cared for in a Red Cross shelter. Back again live at the 15th Battalion. The battle lines here seem very clearly drawn. There seems to be little effect that the ruling would have on these men. They are very clear in their sentiment that they will stay out prior to getting a contract, notwithstanding a ruling of contempt by Judge Heckinger, which indeed would throw their leader, Frank Mascari, and the union leadership in jail in all likelihood. Linda and Mike?
As they had done so often these past 2 days and nights, the two sides in the firefighter strike trooped back into Chancery Court this evening. Before the union, the task of proving it was not in contempt. The city was aiming at both the contempt citation and the issuance of a preliminary injunction against the 4-day-old work stoppage. It got both. It was to be a very tough court session for the union. A total of $40,000 a day in fines assessed against the union itself, against Frank Mascari and 6 of his colleagues. There were no jail terms imposed, but given the size of the fines, that may be academic. Mascari and the others were told they would have to pay those fines every day.
It's a lot of money.
Are you going to pay it?
I don't know where we're going to get it. All right, come on with the mics. Well, yeah, I got to go to a meeting. And
will you order your men back to work now according to the judge's order?
No, I told him no.
And Mascari, for the moment at least, stayed with his slogan, no contract, no work. But union attorney F. Dale Berry sang a different tune, one he insisted he had sung before.
As an officer of the court, I've already advised them of that, a number of times, but they make their own policy, not me.
So they're going their own way?
Absolutely. Hey, the union sets the policy, not me. I can give them legal advice, but I'm just a lawyer.
Judge John Heckinger's injunction also makes strike picketing illegal, though before, during, and after tonight's court session, pickets continued walking the line and trying to keep warm. Gene Randall, News Center 5.
Essence is tonight, he ordered the executive board up in front of him, or the negotiating team. And he fined the union $25,000. First, he asked all of us, And to a man, the answer was the same. Will you go out and instruct your members to go to work? My answer was no. Everybody else answered, no, we can't do that. We informed him that we had made a pledge. When they go out, they don't come back without a signed, sealed, ratified, made law contract. That's where it's at. Where we're at right now is the same thing when we went out. We want them to negotiate this contract. We'll give the lady peace forever. And a no strike clause, everything goes to binding arbitration. But this one, he's got to negotiate across the table, and we got to get the best one this time. And that's where it's at.
Up story at this hour, Mayor Byrne has gone on the attack again, calling this situation at some firehouses mob rule by the pickets. In the City Hall news conference, it was just an hour ago, the mayor touched on a number of issues and repeated her pledge never to negotiate with Union President Frank Mascari again. The mayor denied that she is trying to break the firefighters union, but she said striking firemen can kiss their jobs goodbye.
We will continue recruiting until our full manpower needs are met, using new recruits to fill permanent vacancies created by dismissals of those on strike. We have broken off negotiations. We offered Mr. Mascari a contract. We offered Mr. Mascari a signed contract. We offered binding arbitration, a no-strike clause, and anything that they wanted to go to a mediator. We then had the strike anyway, and even that day, we again said we will go back to the table. And if you will bring in a federal mediator, every issue we will send to the mediation table. Mr. Mascari said back to us, no, no, no. I am telling you that out of a proud fire department, a goon squad of 600 people, the majority of whom do not even live in the city of Chicago, and that's why they want a contract. The majority of them are causing this disruption. I do not intend to have Mr. Mascari and a band of 600 roaming, whatever you want to call them. They don't seem like firefighters. Intimidate this city every single year, and I'm not going to have it happen.
At the same time, the mayor held out an olive branch to those firemen who want to return to work. She says each case will be judged on its own merits, that some men wouldn't return to work because of the pickets. And Byrne says that tomorrow she'll ask the judge to enforce his order that pickets must be removed from fire department property. The mayor contends that the city at this hour is fully protected against a major fire, that more and more regular firemen are returning. But Byrne says that a roving band of strikers will never return to work for the city. Tonight, Frank Mascari doesn't seem particularly upset with the mayor's promise never to negotiate with him. Asked to comment, he simply said, "That's nice. I'll take it to the membership."
Bill, the city took the first step today toward replacing striking firefighters by hiring about 300 fire department recruits, what was billed as a temporary 90-day assignment. Under heavy guard, the recruits reported for training at the fire department gymnasium at Navy Pier. Philip Walters reports.
The mayor was driven past the picket lines, past the shouting, booing firemen, to tell job applicants inside the gym that the 90-day jobs they are being offered will be more than 90 days. The mayor did not want reporters inside to hear those words. She had reporters removed.
Outside.
But behind the closed door, she told the 500 or more job applicants, "You are going in to fill the permanent positions of men who disobeyed their orders. It's not 90 days. Firemen off the job," she said, "will be out of a job unless they can prove they stayed out in fear of crossing picket lines. And those starting today go on the payroll."
She's been lying from day one. She's lied since she's got in office, and she's going to keep on lying and lying and lying until somebody says, "What are you doing?"
It's dangerous. It's dangerous for the kids in there. There's a lot of firemen that have kids in there.
They lied to me. They lied in there. I got nothing. I'm not going to get killed for nothing. No help in there. Mascari don't care. The mayor don't care. Let's get these two people together.
I can't let these people burn up.
They call us scabs. Well, scab means some who care about burning. That's what scab means.
Joe, my last words were I expected Frank Muscari to be taken into custody. I walked in the door. The judge was finding him in criminal contempt of this court. He has just sentenced Frank Muscari to 5 months in the county jail, and he's ordered the sheriff's police to take him into custody. An incredible situation here in the court. 5 of his firefighters, I don't know what's going on behind me at the moment. So, some of the labor leaders who had been working on the union's behalf, I see Bill Lee and a few of them over there. 5 of the firefighters who were members of the executive board were hit with civil contempt charges. Those are the ones I mentioned about the $1,000 fine. Muscari's contempt is criminal. Taken into custody, 5 months in the county jail. Joe, we may have a little more later.
Joel, Frank Muscari, the always outspoken union chief, was talkative again this morning, even after spending the first night of his 5-month jail term in Cook County Jail. Muscari began his telephone conversation with me, an exclusive interview, by making fun of the dressing down he took in Judge John Heckinger's courtroom last night.
I agree with him. A guy like that should be in jail. I thought he was talking about Gacy.
How did you react when the judge said you scuttled it all with your big mouth?
Well, he had to have an excuse. We knew it was coming, so how would I react? I didn't react at all. You nothing to get excited about. That's part of labor law. We're back where we were in the Haymarket days.
Do you think you'll actually have to serve 5 months in jail?
To get a contract, I'll spend the time here. It doesn't bother me.
Do you think that's a possibility?
Naturally, I think it's a possibility. The man sentenced me to 5 months.
Would you call this a whole misunderstanding?
No, I wouldn't. I'd say it was deliberate and calculated.
Why?
Because she gave us a proposition she didn't believe I could sell to a membership. They're going back to work for 24 hours. And when we did it, she was stuck with it. So they had to get out of it. She does not want to negotiate a contract with us.
The judge did say that the city's plan to get the guys back to work was a weak plan. But what he seemed to hang his hat on was your not taking pickets down as you had promised.
Oh, well, that was a misunderstanding. He came into the room and he gave us the impression, 2 words, that peaceful picketing would not be a problem. But when we went into court, the pickets were gone within an hour after that. They said that the picketing is a problem. It's no problem. We'll have them down and nothing flat.
Are you still in charge?
I would say so.
Are you ready to go back to the bargaining table with your people? Will you negotiate from jail?
That's what this is all. Yes, they can come over here. I'll negotiate with them.
You're ready to talk.
We always have been.
Jail may have taken some of the cockiness from the man whose lesser-known nickname, the one besides Moon, is the Rooster, but he's still willing to fight for the contract, spend 5 months in jail if necessary. But tonight, Fahey and Joel, it looks like the firefighters will get that contract, ironically, without the Rooster at the bargaining table.
Perhaps not so ironically, perhaps quite purposely.
A fully orchestrated, fully coordinated union bust.
By the mayor of Chicago?
By the mayor of Chicago, with the utilization of the courts as mapped out and strategized by Safer Shaw with the aid of many other people that are interested in seeing CFL, seeing that strong contracts are not used in the city of Chicago to represent public workers.
Is it going to work?
No, the firefighters won't let it work.
By orders of City Hall, Lass was not included in the meeting on Friday between the union establishment and Mayor Byrne, but he was quite instrumental in rejecting the so-called letter of agreement. Lass is convinced the union bosses don't want the firemen to have a contract.
Because it is a threat to patronage. The principles that would be negotiated in a collective bargaining agreement can and will end the patronage system by instead of having sponsors and your Chinamen or clout as the vehicles for promotion, assignment, transfers. What will be in place will be the rights of seniority, which is the rights that every trade unionist usually enjoys in a collective bargaining relationship.
Obviously, Lass has no use for Chicago's top union leaders, but he does pronounce his loyalty to the officers of Firefighters Local 2, and especially to President Frank Moon Muscari.
Without the presence of Frank Muscari, there can really be no negotiation.
Good evening. Striking Chicago firemen are on the street tonight, marching on fire stations after a giant pep rally at the International Amphitheater. Mary Laney is at one of those stations. She can give us a progress report. Mary?
Yes, Bill, I'm 2700 North. This is Division 3, where the picketing, as you can see, does continue. They're trying to convince other firefighters still on the job to come out and join them on the picket line. This after nearly 4,000 firefighters met at the amphitheater. They heard from leaders of other unions, as well as from their own jailed president, Frank Mascari.
Out here, the saying is keep your chin up and your back against the wall, and that's what I want you to do for at least another week.
There was emotion at this meeting. There was a great steadiness to stay out on the job until the mayor fulfills her role, as the firefighters say, to give them that promised contract that they say she promised when they voted for her for mayor of Chicago. Tonight, they're going out to 5 different divisions. They've been told, although the mayor says there are 900 firefighters back on the job, that there are in actuality only 300 men guarding the city of Chicago's against fire.
Well, as you know, Chicago firefighters have been on strike now for 2 weeks and 1 day, 15 days. And so far, the city's luck has held with no major fires reported. Today, city council leaders, in effect, buried a resolution that would have authorized a council investigation of that strike. Mike Jackson covered the meeting and is with us now. Mike?
Chuck, maybe some history at first. The city and the union have not spoken together about ending the strike since last Friday, when there was another one of those signed agreements that promised to put firefighters back on the trucks, but which fell through. With the impasse, some aldermen in the council, mainly the independents, sought to have the city council take up the strike matter, but the leadership of the city has refused to allow that, and the final blow came this morning.
The firefighters crowded into the back rows of the city council chambers, told me they wanted to go back to work. They wanted amnesty, and they wanted to be back on the trucks. They were hopeful that they would be able to make public some of their views on the breakdown of the negotiations. But they were apprehensive as they watched Alderman Roman Paczynski huddling with Wilson Frost, chairman of the Finance Committee. And they were outraged when the request for the council to investigate was sent to a subcommittee which hasn't even been appointed.
They certainly could put some pressure on the mayor to get her to sit down and work out this agreement.
Wilson is just wrong. He's just ducking the issue.
Will you bring what's the issue?
I'm going to try to get the council to deal with it tomorrow on the floor.
What sort of motion will that take?
We'll have to discharge the committee.
But after this, there was even more action at City Hall, the union leaders meeting with Alderman Frost for more than 2 hours.
It was an informational meeting with, you know, the parties involved. You know who was in there. And to clarify points on the issues, and that's all it was.
That's what Bill Reddy had to say. However, the people from the city, Alderman Paczynski, Edward Doliak, Alderman Frost, all got away before we had a chance to find out what they had to say about the meeting and what progress may have been made. Jory?
So far, Mayor Byrne has made no public response to the firefighters' offer to return to work under an agreement of amnesty and binding arbitration. That offer was made in writing by the union yesterday. But right now, there is an offer of amnesty for the strikers. Andy Shaw is at Navy Pier with details. Andy?
Well, here's the situation, Jory. Behind me, as you can see, there are probably about 50 striking firemen. There may be an equal number of policemen around and inside the fire department gym, and here's why. The mayor has given striking firemen up until 8 o'clock tonight to come here and, in effect, say they want to go back to work. Inside, there are perhaps a dozen empty tables set up where the men who may come here to return to work would come, and they'd be reassigned to whatever division they were needed at. They have until 8 o'clock tonight to come back with total amnesty. That's with the exception of the 5 striking battalion chiefs. If 8 o'clock passes and the men have not come back here, we understand there will be the disciplinary proceedings begun in front of by the personnel board. At this point, an hour and a half into the offer, not a single striking fireman has crossed the picket line here to go back to work. They have until 8 o'clock tonight, as we said, but none have come back so far, and it's hard to tell whether they're going to trickle in as they get reports of this amnesty.
Isn't there a lot of intimidation down there by the mere presence of all those strikers?
There is certainly the potential for a lot of intimidation, but as I said, there's a lot of police protection, and I presume that anyone who wants to come through will be permitted to, which isn't to say that there won't be quite a bit of heckling or razzing, but from the safety standpoint, I would say anyone who wanted to come back would be safe to come in.
Okay, thank you, Andy. Joining us now here in the studio is Bill Reddy, Vice President of the Firefighters Union. Mr. Reddy, what do you make of this latest amnesty offer from the mayor?
Laurie, first of all, I'd like to wish my daughter Jean a happy birthday. She's 16 today, and I'm going to miss her party tonight. Happy birthday, Jean. This offer from the mayor for amnesty is not a complete amnesty. Our membership last night, this was explained to them. They understand what we're talking about. They understand what complete amnesty is. They voted to a man last night, close to 4,000 people there in that hall, that they would not return to work and leave anybody out on the street to be disciplined or fired. I think this move is to start a stampede, and as indicated there by your reporter on the scene, there is no one showing up. And that's the message I would like to get out to our people there, that it's a phony offer. At this point, we don't even know if it's in writing. They have already preconditioned it by saying they are going to fire those 5 chiefs anyhow.
Mr. Reddy, didn't you really admit to me a little earlier that the mayor's really after maybe 5 key people, that she really doesn't want to dismiss the entire fire department, or at least those people that are out on strike?
Chuck, in answer to that, maybe you misunderstood me. She definitely has named 5 people, 5 chiefs, since the start of this strike.
Tomorrow, right?
And their hearings come up tomorrow. We told our people before this even started, we knew this would be a tactic, that we will probably all be fired before this strike is over. And when it is over and we go back to work with a contract, we will go back with complete amnesty whether we're fired or not.
Mr. Ray, let me ask you, I know you're disappointed that the mayor did not accept the union proposal that you made to City Hall, and that she virtually ignored it. How was your proposal any different? Could you not have gotten all those things that you were offering today several weeks ago? Wasn't the city offering that to you? The contract, everything you wanted, everything that you're saying today that you wanted, could you not have had that a few weeks ago?
Laurie, the difference at that time and at this time is this. There's 20 items in that contract proposal that have already been agreed to by both parties. There's 4 additional items that need very little clarification for agreement. There are other issues, and our proposal 2 weeks ago was that we negotiate these issues. The city's position then was, well, if we can't agree to them, let's put them to binding arbitration. We said our preference at that time was, let's negotiate as much as we can rather than put it to a third party. Now what we're saying is, okay, we'll put those issues to binding arbitration.
So you're willing to settle for what you were offered a few weeks ago. Didn't you really kind of blow it by not taking it then when it was offered?
Well, when you're at the negotiating table, you try and negotiate as much as you can. That was the mayor's position at that time. It was, and this has been their position all along, that we do surface bargaining. We were stonewalled many times through this whole negotiating process. And yes, actually, where we're at now is we are back in Mayor Byrne's court. This is what she had proposed previously. We preferred to negotiate it out. Now we're saying, okay, let's put those items to binding arbitration. That would be interest arbitration.
So didn't the union maybe overplay its hand?
Well, you can call it what you like. After all is said and done, it's just like a card game. You could say, perhaps you did. Perhaps you didn't.
I'm interested in how you justify the strike itself. It is illegal. I mean, the court has said that it's illegal. How do you justify the strike?
The only way you get people to negotiate or keep negotiations moving, and this certainly wasn't our desire. We reached an impasse, a stonewall. There was no avenue for settling the issue. And as a matter of fact...
You mean sometimes breaking the law is justified?
I'm not addressing that fact. The people that were advising, and I believe still are advising the mayor, their tactic in other areas with other firefighter groups throughout the state of Illinois, certainly we're most familiar with that. Normal, Illinois, Aurora, Joliet, the same tactic. If you can't settle it with them, put them out on the street, force a strike, and then deal with them from that position.
If I can ask just one quick question. Fine. You seem to agree on contract matters, but now the disagreement is how you'll get back together to talk about it. The mayor seems to want you to go back to work with no promise of amnesty, and you, as the union vice president, are saying you won't go back until there's some talk of amnesty, or at least something in writing. Is that right?
Mike, we will not go back to work until, first of all, there is a complete amnesty agreement drawn up, and we have presented and proposed one to the mayor and presented it to her yesterday through the federal mediators. And number two, we must have a contract when we go back to work. We've been out on the street for 2 weeks, over 2 weeks.
Striking Chicago firemen are being offered amnesty if they report back to work tonight. According to a memo put out by Fire Commissioner Richard Albrecht, striking firemen who come to Navy Pier Gym to report back to work before 8 o'clock tonight will be taken back into the ranks, and no disciplinary action will be taken against them. However, the memo says any firefighter who does not report tonight will have disciplinary charges filed against them tomorrow. Bob Wallace is right now at Navy Pier, and he has been standing there watching and waiting for some of the firemen to report. Have you had any yet, Bob?
Bill, not that I have seen, and not that any of these fellows on the picket line have seen. We heard a report that 1 or 2 were in there, but we have not seen them. That is from our vantage point right in front of the place. The other thing that has got these guys still out here is the other line in this memo, and I'll quote it. It says, battalion chief striking, that's the 5 chiefs that refers to that went out with the men, will report to the personnel board for their hearings at 10 o'clock. That's tomorrow, Friday, February 29th. That's why these guys are not going in, is they say they think that everybody should be given amnesty, and that includes the 5 battalion chiefs who went out with them. What's your impression of this thing?
Well, all the candidates, everybody involved in this strike gets amnesty, or nobody's ever going to go back, and we want a contract.
How about you?
She fired everybody. Now, how can they go in? She fired everybody. So why should they go in there for a trial? They're fired. That's the end of it, right?
How about you?
I think we conceded all we're going to concede in the proposal that we put to the mayor. She got a lot of stuff that we weren't willing to give, but we conceded it, and that's all we're going to concede. What's not being pointed out is Commissioner Quinn died a member of Local 2. Commissioner Albright just resigned for these negotiations, and now she wants to take our lieutenants and captains.
That's about sums up the way these guys feel. They feel they're going to stay out till it's over. They say it's amnesty for everybody, or we're not going back to work. Back to you, gentlemen.
How do you do, ladies and gentlemen? I'm Fahey Flynn, and here's what's happening. The Chicago Firefighters Union has turned thumbs down on the city's proposal to end the 3-week-old strike. Jack Jones is here with the latest story. Jack?
Well, Fahey, the procedure tonight was simple. Union officials explained to the union members Mayor Byrne's clarification of the letter of agreement and recommended that they turn it down, and they did.
A motion has been made here to vote on this memorandum of agreement. The executive board's recommendation is to vote it down. All those in favor of voting the motion down will say aye. All those in favor of accepting the motion, let's hear from them. It's obvious, brothers and sisters, there's a message for the mayor. We see through her falsehoods. We want her back at the bargaining table to negotiate this contract and restore proper fire service to the city of Chicago.
John Hurling, the impression we got from you at 6 o'clock tonight when you were talking to the mayor was that you were going to recommend that your men accept this letter of agreement.
No, that's not what I said. I said we were going to make or recommend to our membership. The recommendation from the board was a negative one. I did not at that time want to expose what the recommendation was. It was merely a recommendation, and the recommendation was negative.
Why, John? Why?
For several reasons. One, that the membership is not in accord with the amnesty agreement that was given to us by the mayor. Second of all, I believe that we don't want to have to agree to fact-finding. We would rather have the articles go to binding arbitration.
So there you have it, gentlemen. The firefighters remain on strike. Tomorrow is day 22.
And those are the two issues, binding arbitration and amnesty.
Amnesty. In spite of what the mayor said at 6 o'clock, the 3-2-1 thing, they won't go for it.
We are all a little bit depressed around here tonight because after Mayor Byrne was on the 6 o'clock news with Fahey and Jack, and the impression we got from the union was that things might have been settled. There might have been some hope. Part of that optimism came from what John Hurling said in asking a question to the mayor while he was on the air. He was worried about the terms of Mayor Byrne's amnesty offer, particularly when a striker might have engaged in what he called criminal or quasi-criminal acts. There was this exchange when our John Kalia raised the issue.
The amnesty problem.
Well, that seems to be a problem. There was criminal and quasi-criminal charges to be put in there, and I'm not too sure with the explanation we got from Attorney Hanley whether that would be something that in the quasi-criminal standards, whether that wouldn't be with ordinances of the city of Chicago, such as obstructing foot traffic or any other charge that could be put against them for a city ordinance.
Quasi-criminal part, if it stood in the way of getting the men back, mercy would be shown on the quasi-criminal.
John, your reaction to that?
That may be well, but I haven't, we haven't been told that until this time.
You were just told that now.
Also, I would like to have the mayor make a comment regarding the, she said in the beginning of the program that she had agreed to arbitration. Now it seems as though in the proposal and the memorandum of agreement, now we have fact-finding, which is not binding on either side. I would like to know if we could return to arbitration regarding these matters.
Fact finder is a word. Somebody has to come in from the outside, and we particularly like the Dean of Management Studies at Northwestern, to determine what's gone wrong in that fire department. You had certain statements to make to me in my office about your ideas on what went wrong. Men on the picket line say what they think went wrong. And literally men in the houses that stayed and fought also think there are things wrong. We want somebody from the outside. Call them a fact finder, call them what you want, to put that department back in order. We told you in the beginning, and we'll tell you again, that that would have been done with or without a strike. There's something wrong in that department.
John Hurley, let me ask you one brief question here. Are you going to recommend the executive committee for the membership to approve this memorandum of agreement?
We'll do that at the meeting tonight.
And we knew all along, or as Jack Jones just told us, we saw in the other interview that was done after the meeting, his mind was made up. He was going to recommend against.
Communication is the name of the game.
Fresh from turning thumbs down on the city's most recent offer to end the strike, firemen are remaining united in their demands. Many left their strike assignments to rally at Daley Plaza. Right before the rally kicked off, the mood was bitter.
She's been lying since she got
lied for 10 months
and she's
now.
going to lie right till she gets out of office.
Well, what is she lying about? This is what I'm...
Everything.
She lied from the day she got in office, and she's going to lie till the day she goes into the grave.
You gotta believe it. So you're prepared to stay out here for as long as...
That's right, ma'am.
Well,
That's right.
If anybody's burning down the city, it's Jane Byrne.
While striking firemen were huddling and waiting to get started, things were popping right across the street on the 5th floor of City Hall. Operation Push President Reverend Jesse Jackson was doing some huddling.
The mayor asked her chief negotiator, Bill Handler, to come here. And they have agreed to allow me to be mediator in this situation. And the transcendent agenda is that black and poor people are being burned up. And we cannot allow the issues of political debate and polarization to be more basic than the need to resolve this grievance.
And Jackson left City Hall, then joined waiting firemen, informed them of this afternoon's negotiating timetable, which got immediate approval. Reverend Jesse Jackson said that he would lead the group on a prayer pilgrimage up Washington Street. He said they'd go 4 blocks and then return here to Daley Plaza. Filing out of Daley Plaza, they marched up Washington Street to State, shouting, "Jesse, Jesse." The march was reminiscent of the Civil Rights Movement. Before long, they'd wound their way back to where they started from. A few more speeches and a prayer.
Let us bow our heads in prayer. This is a serious and critical moment. People's lives have been lost. Other people's lives are at stake. Their homes have been disrupted. We hope that cooler heads will prevail, that divisive rhetoric will give way to hard reasoning,
Rosemary Gully, Channel 7 Eyewitness News.
For 6.5 hours this afternoon and this evening, negotiators for the city and striking firemen talked over their differences at the Bismarck Hotel. Sometimes they met together. At other times, they caucused separately. And throughout it all, the Reverend Jesse Jackson acted to keep the whole thing going. At 9 o'clock tonight, he said progress was being made.
We essentially had today the city, the union, and the community. There is a good attitude now prevailing on both sides. I think that the period of no talk obviously created some strain, but we're beyond that. Our attitudinal disposition is of such. I'm convinced that there's a real possibility that we can move towards some amiable conclusion soon. We did agree upon the framework of a relationship, and I think it is a very healthy step toward an interim agreement.
Jackson indicated one of the most serious issues in the strike may, in fact, be near some kind of resolution.
I think perhaps the most fundamental thing that the mayor has really struggled for is her right as manager of the city to reorganize. She has asserted that right. The union has determined that it will in no means prohibit her from exercising that management right, which I think is very fundamental. On the other hand, the union wants to participate in any form of reorganization that will affect their lives and the destiny of the department.
Jackson said firemen could have a say in the affairs that affect their lives. They're working in the fire department through membership in a fact-finding board, and apparently that might sometime down the road be agreeable to them. Jackson also announced that both the city and the union have agreed on an affirmative action plan to get more minorities into the Chicago Fire Department, a department which is currently overwhelmingly white. But the more immediate problem is the strike itself, and in that area, perhaps tonight's most important accomplishment was in getting union and city negotiators to stop calling each other names in favor of some frank discussions on a contract and a return to work. Jackson can probably take a lot of personal credit for that. He and city negotiators will meet with the mayor tomorrow at 8:30 in the morning, and at 10, both sides, the firemen and the city, will be back negotiating at the Bismarck Hotel.
The city is negotiating an end to the fire strike. It is not negotiating a labor contract. At least that's what Mayor Byrne is saying. During a taping of our Newsmakers program today, Byrne said that a contract is at least 6 months away, maybe longer.
What about a contract in the long run? Yes or no?
Well, I think it's going to be a long, long time, Walter, and I've got to be very honest. As I said, it's a sick department. It's got to be reorganized.
This is all before a contract.
Absolutely.
Mayor Byrne's comment to Walter Jacobson that a contract was a long, long way off quickly erased smiles and closed mouths at fire negotiations here. Going into these talks this morning, acting union president Bill Reddy had been quite open.
Is amnesty the big issue? Good faith negotiation.
Not at this stage.
You agree that that's got to wait till everything else is hammered out? I don't read the newspapers, I'm sorry.
You seem a little more hopeful this morning, or is that my imagination? I got a little more rest last night.
But 2 hours later, after hearing of the mayor's comments, Reddy would not even give a no comment.
Just to get you back, not to produce a contract. She says it'll be 6 months to a year, maybe more before the contract. Do you have any reaction to that?
The Reverend Jesse Jackson, the mediator, in obvious reference to the mayor's words, said he wished both sides would refrain from making such inflammatory statements at a critical time. Then he tried to explain the mayor's statement.
The difference between an interim agreement and a short-term contract is nothing but a matter of semantics. Obviously, if there's going to be a reorganization that should take place in a matter of months, that there has to be some agreement between now and then. You may call it an agreement, you may call it short-term contract, and there's a period where there will be a new relationship established, a new contract, as it were, established.
Frank Muscari, the Firefighters Union president, will spend at least another weekend in the Cook County Jail. The Illinois Appellate Court today postponed its order to free Muscari on $100,000 bond, pending an appeal to the state Supreme Court to release Muscari from jail. The higher court will decide on Monday whether or not to hear that case. Bill?
Good evening, everybody. I'm Linda Yu. Mike Jackson is on vacation this weekend, and we are preempting NBC Nightly News tonight so we can bring you an up-to-date report on the Chicago firefighters settlement situation. Well, members of that firefighters union are back on the job tonight. This is the first time they've been back at work in 24 days. They returned this morning after approving a settlement shortly after midnight. Our Andy Shaw was there as the men went back to their jobs.
At 10 a.m., the first shift of striking firemen returned for temporary reassignment here inside the firehouse at Armitage and Larrabee, one of 8 reporting stations around the city. Predictably, they were nervous, but obviously glad to be back and ready to put the past behind them, whether or not they agreed with the strike settlement.
Okay, I'm sure glad to be back. Strike was too long. It was a ridiculous strike. It should never have happened.
I don't think we're going to get what we set out for, but I'm glad to be back.
We got what we went after, really. Maybe not all of it, but you can't always win.
As they reported, the men were assigned to all of the empty firehouses, so they wouldn't be mixed in immediately with men who did not go on strike. But the back-to-work plan ran into at least a temporary delay when police wouldn't let striking firemen back into the houses, like this one here at Berry and Levitt. Police had orders to keep them out until fire officials had inspected inside, and it looked like that might cause some serious problems. But after a few hurried phone calls downtown and a quick look around, the firemen were okay to settle in.
Right now, this house is open.
That meant checking out equipment that's been idle for 3.5 weeks to get ready for that first alarm. And it also meant putting the house back into living order, even though it's a house they haven't worked in before and may not be at very long.
Well, we're used to being detailed anyway, you know. Certain houses you get detailed. So you can put 24 hours in any house, you know.
The end of the strike also means time off for the weary firemen who've worked the last 24 days straight and who finally get to go home tomorrow, but then have to mix back in with the strikers.
I'm glad it's finally over with. It's been, you know, it's been terrible for the whole fire department. You know, it's been like a civil war, I think.
I just hope that, you know, everyone forgets what happened, you know. I hope when I go back, they ain't gonna hate me forever, that's all, you know.
Both sides agree a lot of the past will fade away when they start fighting fires side by side again.
All of those men back to work was hammered out in a marathon session on Friday. That session was mediated by Chicago's Reverend Jesse Jackson. Now here's what the agreement calls for. First, partial amnesty with all strikers working 1 day without pay and those 5 battalion chiefs working 4 days with no pay. Now for its part, the city is going to try to get all fines and citations against the union and its president, Frank Muscari, dismissed. And by the end of the year, all of the trucks will be manned by 5 firefighters instead of 4. A touchy issue of union representation for officers of the fire department will be settled either by fact-finding or binding arbitration. Rich Samuels has more on that.
The parties to date have arrived at a tentative agreement.
Announcement that a tentative agreement had been reached came at 10:02 last night from the Reverend Jesse Jackson, who somehow had brought the 2 sides back to the bargaining table a day earlier. It was an agreement union leadership could endorse.
Am I personally going to recommend approval? Yes. To the executive board? Yes. Yes, I will.
At midnight, nearly 3,500 striking rank and file gathered at the McCormick Inn for a ratification vote. The room was not large enough to hold them, apparently not large enough to hold the press either.
Will the press kindly leave the room?
But what was important above all else was the document carried to the Reverend Jackson by union leader Michael Lass. It was the draft of the interim agreement already signed by the union, ready now for another signature.
Okay. And then here's for the end of the strike, and you have to get it down here, okay? That's all we need.
Is it set? Shortly before 1 this morning, Reverend Jackson took the document for delivery to the mayor. In her near North Side apartment, Mayor Jane Byrne signed the agreement. The strike was all but over. The document was returned to the McCormick Inn. Reverend Jackson carried it to the mezzanine, back to the ballroom, where the agreement was being read to the rank and file, point by point.
All right, let's take a hold.
Formal ratification came at 1:37 this morning. No dissenting voices were heard.
So what's going on? Beat 'em, baby.
shift. Tomorrow's the second shift.
And there was a prayer that the bitterness of more than 3 weeks would not be prolonged.
Right on, brother.
The firefighters' strike was over. Rich Samuels, News Center 5.
With us now in our newsroom is the acting president of Local 2 of the Firefighters Union, Bill Reddy. Bill, does that sound to you like an accurate representation of exactly what the agreement amounted to? We have yet to see an actual copy of that agreement.
Mike, we do have a contract. We're returning to work with the contract. One thing I have to impress all your listeners with is this agreement, signed by Mayor Byrne and ourselves, will have to go to the City Council to be ratified there in ordinance form by the aldermen. However, it is a contract to address the issue of penalties under the amnesty agreement. All members of the fire department will have to work an additional day that would normally be their day off. Now, our membership has agreed to this on the basis that they owe some type of retribution to the community, and they're doing it in that spirit. The fire chiefs who were under charges, those charges will be dropped, and they will lose 4 days.
You say you owe something to the community? Are you saying you're sorry you had this strike?
The firefighters all during this strike felt deeply concerned about the lack of protection in the communities. And it's because of this concern, in the spirit of this penalty that is being imposed upon them, they're accepting this penalty as a retribution to the people in the communities. That's correct.
Mr. Reddy, what was Jesse Jackson's actual role in these negotiations? You were there, you can tell us. Was it shuttle diplomacy? What did he do?
He certainly acted as a mediator, and a good mediator, I might add. The community groups that he represents certainly created pressures on the city administration, as did other organizations, religious groups, labor organizations, and I believe it's because of all these pressures from the public that we reached a settlement.
Reddy may call it a contract, but the title of the pact is, and we quote, an interim agreement. Whatever the interpretation, the settlement involved concessions from both sides. It provides firefighters with only limited, not full amnesty. The strikers will not be paid for time spent on the picket lines, and depending on their rank, they must work for as many as 4 days without pay. It includes a no strike and no lockout clause and calls on the city to hire and promote more minorities. It also establishes a fact-finding board to settle a few unresolved issues, including the union's demand to represent officers. Seniority issues, wages, vacation periods, and paid holiday time also have yet to be settled. Now, that settlement also says the city has asked the courts to be lenient concerning penalties against the strikers and with regard to Union President Frank Muscari's jail term for contempt. Carrie?
Mike, getting back on the job was a welcome change for the city's 4,300 firemen, as John Quinones reports.
The dawning of day 24 of the firefighters' strike found most of the city's fire stations undermanned once again. At this station, only supervisory personnel and a few fire academy cadets stood vigil over engines and fire trucks. But today was also the dawning of an end to the strike. And by 9 this morning, the first shift of firefighters began to gather across the street. It was one of 8 locations where they reported for their new assignments. The atmosphere was jovial. Clearly evident was that special firefighter camaraderie.
Do you think the 23-day-old strike was worth it, though?
Yeah, it's you got to start somewhere and you got to fight for it, and that's what it's all about, you know.
Everything takes time. This took a little longer than we expected, but we finally got some decent conditions to work under.
At 10 this morning, these 50 firefighters were ushered inside the station, and the first shift was officially back on the job.
Hi, guys. How you feel? Very good, very well. I think everything's working out fine now, John.
Ain't you glad it's over? For you?
Nice to be back at work, boy. I'm telling you, I'm broke.
I dreamed of being a firefighter when I was a kid. I'd hear the engines and trucks racing down the street, and I would run as fast as I could to the corner in hopes the firemen would wave to me. We were always taught to have respect for the police and firemen. I missed the test for the firefighters exam in 1968 because I was in Vietnam. But as soon as I got back, I went down to City Hall and filled out a postcard that stated I was interested in being a firefighter. 4 years later, I got that postcard back telling me to take the test. I passed and was put on the list and called 3.5 years later, so I waited 8 years for the job. I was the happiest person in the world when I received my letter to report to the Fire Academy. My dream was now a reality. I worked hard at it. I believe I gave 100% while on duty or off. I even took fire science courses to make sure I'd get ahead and lessen my chances of getting injured. I was written up a few times because I made some rescues. Things were going along great until those strike talks started. Then we finally had to make a decision, walk out or stay. Everyone looked at each other wondering who would go. I believe most of us walked because we all expected the strike to last 4 or 5 hours. Now 4 or 5 hours turned into 4 or 5 days. We then had to make another decision, go back to work or be fired. I started calling a few of our chiefs and other firemen, trying to get some idea, some suggestion. The chiefs begged you to come back, and the firemen said, no, it's too late to go back. I always thought I had a pretty good head and used good common sense or could analyze a problem fairly well. I searched for the right answers, but found myself confused for the first time in my life because I couldn't find an answer. I said, I have to take care of my wife and kids, so I'll go back to work. Then I said, I'm not taking care of my wife and kids if I go back to work. Someone might hurt them if I go back. I thought about my relatives on the job. If I went back, and they didn't, and then got fired, we'd never again have a family meal together. I found myself listening and following people that aren't as intelligent as I am. I got headaches from thinking all day of which way to go. I wasn't eating or sleeping well. I was so confused and unsure and tired of looking for answers that I found myself crying in my wife's arms. I couldn't find the answer. I decided not to sell my brothers out. Forget about going back. The only way to go back is we all go back together. I want to go back, and so do a lot of other guys. I don't want anyone hurt, and I want to protect the citizens, especially the kids. But I also have to protect my #1 priority, my family. They come first. My little boy always says, Daddy, when I grow up, I want to be a fireman, just like you. Now I got to tell him, his daddy had to quit to save his family. I'm kind of glad he's only 4, because it's so bizarre, he couldn't understand it. As a matter of fact, neither does his daddy.